or in any other way, depending on who's in control or who's not next
Don't
year.
you also run up, though, against a federal issue? I mean, there are civil rights issues, there are minority-majority districts, particularly down in New York City, where there are specifically Voting Rights Act protections that are for classes of minority voters, African American and Latino.
We, first of all, we wouldn't have the ability to counteract the Voting Rights Act if we wanted to, but just to be extra careful, the legislation itself specifically says that nothing we're doing through the enactment of this bill would give us the right to overcome any concerns that are expressed through the Voting Rights Act.
You have a colleague, Assemblyman Brodsky, who he did sign that pledge. The pledge that you're referring to is former Mayor Ed Koch's pledge, who has been on this show, and he believes that this is sort of the crux of reform in Albany, that once you make things fairer, then you can't take out the money issue. Incumbents still have an edge because they're already there and perhaps better known. But this really could get to some of the dysfunction that is bedeviling Albany for so many years. Assemblyman Brodsky says, well, this is great that you're going to create this commission, but if you don't do it through a constitutional amendment, then every couple of years the legislature can come in and change it by statute. I mean, there's nothing to stop elected officials, once you institute this commission, from, I don't know, 5 years from now saying, we hate this commission, we'd like to change it.
Well, first of all, if it was 5 years from now, at least we would have had a fair process next year, which would be important. But there's no question the best way to do this would be through constitutional amendment because it's more permanent. However, given the time frame that would be required to change the Constitution, we're really up against the clock right now. We would need to pass it through 2 separately elected legislatures and then put it up for a referendum. The soonest that could happen would be November of 2011. At that point, the census figures will already be in. We should be pretty far along in the redistricting process by then. So I just don't know that we have the time to do it that way. And that's why both Mayor Koch's group, Attorney General Cuomo, soon to be governor,
an interesting slip there, Mike Gianaris,
are focusing specifically on this piece of legislation to the exclusion of any other effort as the way to make this happen at this point in time, given the time frame we're dealing with.
Okay, so your best guess about whether or not this actually can pass. I mean, certainly the focus right now in Albany is the budget. Everybody's focused on the budget. The legislative session was supposed to end Monday. It's not, it's now a couple of days after that. We may get into Friday already tomorrow, and then perhaps even Monday of next week. And everyone will want to go home and hit the campaign trail. What's the likelihood that this gets passed?
Well, there's a number of pieces of legislation that still have to be dealt with after the budget's done, and they've sort of been put on the side until the budget's completed. So I think in all likelihood we'll be here closer to the end of next week regardless, and that gives us a significant amount of time to work with. As you know from being around here long enough, it's entirely possible we'll be back for special sessions at some point later in the year. So we still have time to deal with this as well as probably dozens of other bills that are awaiting action. The important thing to note is it's a very difficult issue to deal with. We've been slowly making progress. It's now moved out of committees in both houses and is sitting in the Finance and Ways and Means committees. We're pretty close to getting it to the floor in each house, and the only way to do this is to keep rolling the boulder up the hill, and eventually we're going to get there.
Well, it's going to be very interesting to watch. We'll be keeping a close eye on it because it is a fascinating piece of legislation. Mike Gianaris, Assemblyman from Queens, thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you, Liz.